is what is your major takeaway from Waiting for Superman? So, go ahead, Michelle.
So I've seen the movie probably 15 times now, and I cry every time I see it. So for those of you who don't think that I'm warm and fuzzy, I think my major takeaway, which is the takeaway that most people have when they watch this movie, is God, this sucks, right? I mean, we are supposed to be living in the best country in the world, right? The land of opportunity and equality and all this stuff, and we, are subject our kids to a reality where the best that parents can do is say, cross your fingers, Daisy. She's got her hands all balled up, and whether or not she gets a good education is dependent on luck. The spinning of the lottery ball. I mean, there's nothing, I think, more disheartening in some ways than the fact that that is happening to children in cities across this country. I think, though, that the other thing that is important about the movie is that it shows, the challenges, first of all, in a way that normal people can understand, and it also puts a face to this stuff. And it causes people to think in different ways because, I'm a lifelong Democrat, and I'm a good Democrat. When I first came to DC, I was like, oh, I don't like vouchers. Vouchers are bad for the system and all this sort of stuff. You can't watch a movie like that and see Bianca and not want to write the $500 check so she can go to her graduation, right? And so it just makes you when it's a face to the problem, and it's a specific family that is struggling through this, it just makes you question all of the sort of, beliefs that you might have, and I think that's a good thing for the country, and I hope that more people see the movie so that it sparks more debate and conversation.
Grayson or Zach, do you guys have any take on the movie?
I don't think I quite can follow that.
Well, I just wanted to say that I also couldn't help but tear up, even though I was really trying not to, until I realized that I would be sitting in front of all of you here in just a few minutes after the movie was over. So I think that my main reaction is what an incredibly moving story, what an incredibly powerful story, and that it really calls us to action. And then the second thing that comes to mind is how did our public institutions end up in such a difficult state of affairs? And to really sort of begin to peel back the layers of that question, and how so many sort of good-hearted people have come together to produce such an epic failure. So I think that it actually raises more questions than it resolves. In the sense that it doesn't really get at those questions of why our public institutions are failing. In this sense, we're talking about the education system. So I think that those are the questions that it makes you want to get out there and address and find answers to those questions so that we can act.
The next question for the panel is, should we be worried about the way the United States ranks internationally in student performance?
Yes.
Next one, though, is while charter schools are beginning to play a greater role in the American education system, how is their effect taking away from local school districts' ability to improve public schools?
So I'll take that one. I don't think that charter schools and the charter school movement is taking away at all from the traditional public school system. In fact, I think that in many circumstances it is helping. So, for example, here in DC, because the charter school sector had grown so aggressively, and because kids were leaving the DCPS en masse to go to the charter system, I think that actually provided some of the leverage that the city needed, and that the mayor ultimately needed to be able to take over control of the schools and to see a really significant shift in the way that we were doing things. Number one, so I think that just the competition and the dynamic that they've created is a positive one. I think that Davis is clear that in the movie that all charter schools are great, and we know that here in DC we have some unbelievable charter schools, and then we have some pretty crappy charter schools. So I don't think that either the movie or anyone is trying to say that charter schools are the answer, the end-all be-all to anything. But what has happened in high-performing urban charter schools across this country is something that really is unprecedented, where they are at scale ensuring that poor and minority kids are getting an absolutely excellent education, and they are closing the achievement gap, which is something that people, 20 years ago didn't think was possible. And the best charter schools are doing that and doing that at scale. And I think that that shouldn't be lost on anyone. For those folks who think, oh, well, we just need to figure out what the answers are, what we need to do. We know what works. We just don't want to do the things that work because they're really, really hard. But if you go to some of these high-performing charter schools in cities across the country, including here in DC, you can actually see exactly what building blocks they put in place to make sure that kids are achieving at the highest levels.
So, while I'm kind of a skeptic of charter schools, and similarly want to go into them for my career, which puts me in an awkward place. So yeah, use this against me in the future. I think the charter schools have kind of not, they have the potential in a lot of ways to contribute to what public education can do as a whole, but that has largely, I think, been overpromised and underdone. So you see very limited collaborations between charter schools sharing those best practices. There's also a question of, everyone who's in a charter school had to apply. They had to be proactive. And while I definitely support that, because charter schools are, in a sense, an experiment, and we don't want to assign people to an experiment, that's a little unethical. Thank you, Hillary. While we don't want to assign people to an experiment, it's also hard to establish what effects of those are due to motivation of students and parental involvement. KIPP, for example, requires all of their parents to sign an agreement to be involved in their school. And this would be a question that I would have for you later, but how do you get a school system that has truancy almost at 20% to be high performing? When 20% of students are missing more than almost 3 weeks of school, how do you make more than a year of academic progress compared to students who are there almost every day? So we have seen limited partnerships, and again, ones that you've set up between charter management organizations that work and actually operate public schools and turn them around with a really enhanced oversight from public school districts. And ultimately, that's where you see charter schools really truly being effective, is when there's effective oversight.
Something very quick to add. I think Grace and Michelle both made great points. I think you sometimes hear people say, like, let's take the successful charter schools, let's run with that, let's make sure that there are more charters or more opportunities for this kind of innovation to happen. And I think what I want to encourage everyone to observe is what an enormous challenge it is to scale up an idea that works, right? We're always looking for ways to scale up ideas that work. And then what an enormous opportunity our public school systems represent to scale up the best ideas of charter schools. We already have a very efficient potential lever to bring those ideas to massive numbers of people, and let's just not forget that it's sort of sitting right in front of us.
The next question is from the next cards that you guys filled out right after the movie. So we.
Okay, so our first question from the audience is, what can we, the young college population, do to fix the problems our education system is facing? Is there ultimately a solution? And if so, who are the main drivers that will allow this to happen?
Students first.
I think there's a lot that young people can do. I think that there's everything from, as college students, going into the schools, tutoring kids, mentoring kids. You cannot underestimate the power that that has. We started a program that would bring people who were working in a particular corporation into DC public schools to mentor and tutor some of our seniors, our high school seniors who were not on track to graduation. And you know, the sort of mentors were a little nervous. They're like, it's been a long time since I've had to do algebra, calculus. I don't know if I can do this or not. And what they found was that much more than sort of tutoring in physics, what the kids appreciated most was having a positive adult role model in their life who could advocate on behalf of them and help them navigate their way through the system. That's what they appreciated most, because a lot of our kids just don't have that person. So, you know, you just can't underestimate what you as an individual can do for individual kids. And, you know, we have a relatively small school system in DC. There are 45,000 kids, and when we did that program, we estimated that there were a couple of thousand kids who were off track. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that we could get a couple of thousand citizens to, you know, each mentor one of those kids and make a huge difference overall in what was happening in the system. So that's one way. I think you can become teachers, you can join organizations like Teach for America. I think those make huge, huge differences in the lives of kids every day. And then you can get involved. I mean, part of what we hope comes out of this movie is for people to understand that part of the problem is a political problem. Right? And we can't just sort of think that if we have good ideas and we put those good ideas forth, that somehow they're magically going to take hold and everybody's going to shift the way that they're doing things. No, this is about politics. And if we can start a movement amongst the college kids in America for you all to take the lead and say, you know what, we as the next generation are not going to accept this anymore for our nation. We are going to sort of take this. We are going to be the ones who are putting pressure on our elected officials to do right by kids. I think that could be incredibly powerful.
I think ultimately just look at what you want to accomplish in your life in education reform and think, why can't you do it now? I don't think that there's a legitimate answer for that, except for maybe actually being a full-time teacher, which is a little hard to do while you're in college. Although there is one kind of workaround to that, I believe the applications due maybe in 24 hours. Breakthrough Collaborative is an amazing organization that allows you to teach over the summer for students in middle school, and it really builds them up academically so that they're able to go to top high schools in the city and really perform well there. Whereas the performance, the level of education that they had in their elementaries and middle schools might have not allowed them to do that. So that's one example on the very local level. But also what we do with Roosevelt is just come up with ideas, think of ways to implement them, and either do it yourself or go push it on someone else who can. So one example of this was the New Haven Promise, which was students at Yale University said, you know, we want every student who's, is it low income or is it just in general? Anyone who goes to New Haven Public Schools to have their tuition paid for. So presented that, and then they ended up ultimately getting the funding for it so that every New Haven student can go to college.
And we've had a student at Chamberlain University started a university program called CELA. I can't remember exactly the acronym. Basically, an innovative model for college students teaching reading to disadvantaged kids. It's been able to be scaled up across the country. Universities are just fantastic places to do innovation. There are resources, there are professors. Frankly, I know all of you are extremely busy, you don't feel like you have any time, but you actually do have quite a lot of free time that you could reallocate, sort of move around to do real activism and make a real difference. And we should recognize the enormous opportunity that our universities present as labs for creating new kinds of educational resources. And furthermore, we need to not stay within our academic walls. We need to recognize that teachers themselves have significant learnings that we as college students, or you all as college students, probably aren't going to have, having not taught, but not to be shy about it, to get out there and ask people what they perceive and how you can help address those problems.